All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to, it's Wednesday already. It's the beauty of the short week, is it not? Yeah, today's Wednesday. Welcome to Wednesday. Just to remind you quickly, we will have a quiz on Friday, like I mentioned. I posted the information in Microsoft Teams, and so I think we're doing something like classes 10 to 21 or 11 to 21, whatever I wrote in Microsoft Teams. They were slightly different for the two classes. Yes? What's that?
Is sexism included?
It is
Or not yet?
not, I don't think. I think it's just oppression and ableism. Yeah. Yeah, because I think we started sexism around class 21 or 22.
Mm.
Yeah, we're going to do the power
Yeah.
version.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, that's what it'll be.
And that video for Adam.
Yeah, with Adam Pearson. Yeah, I get to ask you Adam Pearson questions. That'll be fun. Yeah, so that's that. It's up there, and so we'll do that Friday, same way as normal. And so, if you're an online student, I will talk to you on Microsoft Teams first thing in the morning from 8 to 9 o'clock Vancouver time. And then if you're an in-class student, you will come into class and you'll start writing at 9. And I'll try to get all the online people done before that, hopefully, but sometimes that's a challenge. Okay, that's what we'll do. Let's jump back into where we were yesterday. Oh yeah, okay. So we finished watching The T Word with Laverne Cox, and we met these young transgender youth who expressed kind of what their lives were like and sort of struggles that they had, and sort of explained a little bit about what their world is like. And one of the things that came up was the idea of language and pronouns. And so I thought I would use this opportunity to engage with a bit of a debate that was going on a couple of years ago. I don't actually know where that debate is at the moment. Like, I don't really know what's happened with it, so I should probably look it up and find out what the resolution of that is, if there has been one. But as I mentioned, there was a bit of a controversy at University of Toronto, and Jordan Peterson here, who's a psychology professor, kind of took issue with a memo that was circulated by the administration of University of Toronto. And the administration sent around a memo to all instructors and staff saying, hey, we have some gender diverse people in our staff, in our faculty, and in our student body, and we need to build a safe environment for them and help people to feel included. And so please use the pronouns that people ask you to use. By the way, have you seen people start to do that? Maybe like maybe in a place like Twitter, for instance. So if you go to their Twitter profile, you'll see that they have their name, and then it'll say she, her, or he, him. You've seen that? Yeah, good morning.
And on the birth certificate, they put others written.
Oh.
Male, female, others.
Oh, and there's others too, yeah. So people are we're starting to see some space being made for different pronouns or sort of acknowledging different genders, right? And so, yeah, the U of T was basically saying, look, please use the pronouns that people ask you to use in the spirit of being inclusive and creating a safe space. And we said that Jordan Peterson, psychology prof, disagreed with that. And so I supplied you with this article to kind of look at both sides of this issue and see what these people are arguing about or for or against. So I gave you that article and I got you to read it, and I think we're not quite done it yet. And so I kind of feel like we should take 7 minutes. 5 seems like too little, 10 seems like too much. 7 minutes, is that okay? To reread the article and just refresh our memories. And again, keep in mind you're looking for both arguments, right? So Jordan Peterson will have an argument that he is trying to supply, and of course these LGBTQ activists, trans activists, student council, and probably the University of Toronto as well, they'll have an argument that they're trying to push as well. And so I want you to be able to figure out what both of these arguments are so we can dissect them a little bit, okay? So I'm gonna put 7 minutes on the clock here. We'll just review that article really quickly, and then we'll talk about it. Cool. There we go. just another minute or so, okay? Okay, ready, Shreddies? There's so much to talk about here. There's lots to talk about. So, as I mentioned, there's two sides to this kind of controversy, at least two, maybe more, but we'll start with two anyway. Who do we want to start with in terms of figuring out an argument? Do you want to start with Jordan Peterson, or do you want to start with the opposite side? Where do you want to start? Which one's easier? Huh? You want to start with Jordan? Okay, let's start with Jordan Peterson. So what's the kind of conclusion of his argument? What's the kind of main point, the main thing that he is saying? He's saying a bunch of things, but what's the conclusion of this argument?
Forcing people to use the preferred pronoun into the end of free speech.
Okay, forcing people to use these sort of gender-neutral pronouns will lead to the end of free speech. What do we think about that? I want to think about it because I'm wondering if that's the conclusion, or I'm wondering if you have the conclusion and a premise stuck on the end. I'm wondering if the free speech thing should be thought of as support for his conclusion. Because I think definitely the main part of it is he doesn't want to be forced to use these pronouns, right? So his conclusion is, I don't think I should have to use these gender neutral pronouns. The question is, is that a premise, the thing about free speech, or is that part of his argument? You think it's a premise? Okay. Let's modify Mulder's suggestion for now, and then once we figure out the other pieces, if it makes sense to put it back into the conclusion, we will. But we'll decide not to decide for a minute. So he doesn't want to use these gender neutral pronouns, and one of his premises, let's just say that it is that to do so means that his free speech is being compromised, right? He's losing the right to free speech, which is guaranteed usually in most democratic societies. What's another premise? What's another thing that he says why he shouldn't have to use this language? Why else should he not have to do this? Okay, he thinks, okay, so he says that this kind of language was created by power mad people. Okay. Do you have any idea what he means by that? Like, can you unpack that a little bit, and what on earth does he mean? Who are these power mad people? What do they want? Liberals. Okay, liberals are power mad people. Okay, and what kind of power do they want? What do they want to happen here? Okay, yeah. Okay. So somehow using these pronouns will lead to some sort of liberal power grab? You might have to help me out here. I'm still a little confused. What other things does he say? Some power mad people. They appear to be liberals. Oh, okay. So he makes a Nazi comparison. Okay, that's always dangerous to do. Lots of people like to compare things to Hitler and the Nazis, and as it turns out, most things are not comparable to Hitler or the Nazis. So just a tip for all of you out there: if somebody's making a comparison to Hitler or the Nazis, there's about a 95% chance it's not a good comparison. So whether or not Jordan is falling into that trap is another story, but usually it's not a very good comparison. I'm looking at you, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Gina Carano. Okay, so there's some sort of connection to an ideology, right? Maybe a Nazi ideology, and what other kind of ideology? Totalitarianism. What does that mean? Yeah, totalitarian states are states where the government is in control of everything. Okay, so think of like Soviet Russia, think of North Korea. The government controls every aspect of people's lives, okay, and is involved in every aspect of people's lives with full control. So he's suggesting that. He talks about Marxists. Do you know what Marxists are, or Marxism? No. Karl Marx is kind of the founder of communism, if you will. And so he's the one he writes a couple of books in the sort of mid to late 1800s, and that's what inspires Vladimir Lenin to have a communist revolution in Russia and sort of creates the Soviet Union. So it's Karl Marx's ideas about class struggle and equality that sort of lead to communist states later on. So he's kind of connecting the Nazis here, he's connecting totalitarian states, he's connecting Marxism to this. What else is he trying to argue? Or what else is he trying to say? Okay, so the use of this language is so it sort of supports an ideology. That ideology is supported by the left. The left is trying to sort of gain power. He's worried about some sort of, I don't know, Nazi totalitarian Marxist state. I'm not sure. By the way, we don't have time to go into this, but really the Nazis are fascists and the Marxists are communists, and they're kind of on opposite ends of the political spectrum. They're not, in some ways you can compare them to each other, but they're kind of not the same thing. What else is he saying? Or is he saying anything else? Okay, let's put him on pause for a sec. Let's talk about the other side. So the other side of the argument is kind of represented by student advocates, by the LGBTQ community, by trans students and staff at the university, and by the university administration themselves, right? So these are the kind of groups making the opposite argument. And what's the opposite argument here? Yeah, very simple, right? That we should in fact use the pronouns that people ask us to use, right? We should do that. Why should we do that? What are the premises for their argument? Why should we call people by these, especially these made up pronouns? Not even real words. I'm just kidding. Of course they're real words. All words are made up, right? That's what Thor says anyway. I actually laughed out loud when that was. Is that Infinity War or is it Endgame? It's Infinity War, right? Where I forget what Thor says. He has to go to Nidavellir or whatever, and Star-Lord says it's a made-up word, and he's like, all words are made up. Anyway, what's okay? So why should we use these pronouns? Okay, so using these pronouns creates a safe space for people who are gender non-binary, gender fluid, transgender, right? So it creates a safe space. What else? Why else? Jordan says that this is a free speech issue, right? That he should be allowed to speak as he likes. Is that true? Is free speech covered under this umbrella? Because we talked when we discussed Adam Pearson, we talked about hate speech, right? And so you can, in liberal democracies like the UK and Canada and the US, you have free speech. You can say what you want, but you may not use your free speech to sort of stray into hate speech, right? And hate speech is where you are spreading hatred or mistrust or negative ideas about a particular social group, right? And so we said that the comment on Adam Pearson's page, on his YouTube page, was hate speech, right? That guy was saying this guy should be burned to death at birth because of his facial disfigurement, right? Now, is Jordan engaging in hate speech here, would you say? Is this hate speech? I don't want to use these pronouns. I think I want to do what I want to do. Hate speech? Not hate
because
speech?
He's not actively, like, he's not actively shaming on the other for using the correct pronoun.
Right? Yeah, so he's not really spreading any specific hatred or negative ideas about gender non-binary or transgender people, right? So I would agree with Scotty. I don't think this is hate speech. Is he discriminating? Is this discrimination? No, why not?
This is not
Because he's not harming anyone.
Like he himself claims that he shouldn't use the pronouns, then that's not discrimination, but he tells everyone not to use the pronouns, that's discrimination.
Say that for me one more time.
If he's encouraging other people not to use them, then that's discrimination.
Right. If he encourages other people not to use them, then that's discrimination. But as long as he doesn't do that, he's not discriminating. Is that true? No? Why no?
Because I think it takes one, like, him not calling people by their identity is discrimination.
Right, and he's not necessarily doing it for everyone, right? He's only doing it for people who are gender fluid, gender non-binary, transgender, right? So I would say, and remember that's what it is, right? Is when you act on a prejudicial belief, right? When you're treating people differently simply because of the social group they belong to. And so he's not saying, I'm not calling any of my students by pronouns. He's saying just this little group I'm not going to do it for, right? And so, yeah, I think he's discriminating here for sure. What do you know about academic freedom and tenure? Do you know anything about those concepts at a university? Do you know what tenure is?
I've heard, I feel like I do, but not really.
You feel, yeah, it's one of those words that you can't define, but yeah. So at a university, when you become a tenured professor, what you have to do is, so you're hired as a professor, so you get a PhD. If you're lucky, you get a job teaching at a university, and you're an adjunct professor or something. And so you work at the university, you teach and you research and you publish as much as you can for about 7 or 8 years, and then your department will review your academic output and career. And if they feel that you're a solid researcher and you're good for the university and they like what you're doing, they'll grant you tenure, which basically means you have a job for life. Okay? So you basically cannot be fired unless you break a law or do something bad. But really your job is guaranteed as long as you want it. And for most of us that might sound like quite a perk. Does it not? Yeah, quite a perk. And it is. And the reason why it exists is because the job of professors, the job of academics, is to seek the truth, right? So to do their research and figure out what it means and publish it, regardless of whether it is politically palatable or not, right? So for instance, maybe to take a less prickly issue, climate change, right? The government might not want to accept climate change because it might be bad for the economy, it might be bad for politics. But you don't want politicians keeping academics from speaking out about climate change if it's a real issue, right? If they have data to back it up and they're doing their research properly and they're like, hey, guys, we've got a major global warming issue here. We need to pay attention to this. We need to look at it. So the government might not want to hear that, but you don't want the government keeping academics from saying these things, right? Because the job of a university is to discover what is true and what is fact. And you don't want politicians clamping down on them, saying, no, don't research that. Don't publish this. It's not good for our power. You don't want that, right? So academics for that reason have tenure so that they cannot be fired, right? So as long as they're doing their research and they're publishing it, and of course other academics are critiquing it and arguing over it all the time, basically that allows them to keep doing that, and the government cannot interfere in that. And so most of the professors, not most of the professors, but the professors that have been there for a long time and are established, they have tenure. And so Jordan here is a tenured professor. He basically can't be fired unless he does something like bad, right? But he cannot be fired for anything he says in his academic work. His academic work will be judged by the research community, not by the university, and not by the government. So that said, why can't he just say what he wants if he has academic freedom? Why can't he?
Some topics may be sensitive.
True, but academics shouldn't necessarily shy away from those sensitive topics, right? For some people, climate change is a sensitive topic, but we should still talk about it. Racism is a sensitive topic. We should still talk about it. But you're right.
And if they talk about something that is not true, then why do they talk about it first?
Well, exactly, right? Because the way that academics work is that what you write and what you publish is constantly being critiqued and attacked by other academics, right? So if you publish something, you don't want it to be bad science. You don't want it to be poorly done, because that'll affect your credibility, right? People will think you're, oh, yeah, that guy, he's a hack, he doesn't know what he's doing, right? There's a lot of reputation and pride on the line here. So academics really do their best to publish the most accurate, well thought out pieces of writing they can possibly generate, right? Because they don't want their colleagues thinking of them as an idiot, right? This is a career area that is built on expertise, right? The fact that you know more than anyone else on this subject. You don't want people thinking you're an idiot, do you? No. So their academic work is kind of policed by the academic community, right? And you want to make sure that you publish the best material you can, because you don't want people thinking you're a doofus, right? So, but again, does Jordan's academic freedom here extend this far? Is he allowed to say to the university, well, I have academic freedom and I have tenure, so you can't make me do this?
No, that's not how it works.
It's not how it works? Why not?
Because if he claims that he has academic freedom to speak around, then I don't think that's a suitable reason for him to not use preferred pronouns.
Sure, but why not? It's good that you think that, but why should we say that? Because what?
There's a law about the cost that goes
Well, that was before the House of Commons, right? There was a law saying you cannot discriminate against people based on gender identity. So there's that kind of thing in the mix. Nasser, what were you going to say about does his academic freedom extend this far?
I'll say no.
You say no, why?
Just like how you can teach about racism, it's a sensitive topic, but that doesn't mean you teach about racism by being racist.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you can't.
So his I'm gonna paraphrase you a little bit and just add something in. So is his teaching and his research separate things? Is his classroom job different from his research?
I believe it is.
Yeah, I believe it is too. And so his academic freedom allows him to do whatever research, whatever research he is inclined to do, and he, will do his research to the best of his ability. He will publish it. The academic community will critique it and say, yes, this is great. Jordan Peterson knows what he's talking about, or what is this garbage sort of thing. The academic community will do that, but the classroom is different, isn't it? Because he's being paid. He's being paid by the university to do a different job, right? And would you say that part of that job is to create a comfortable, safe environment so that his students can learn? Maybe not comfortable, but maybe safe, okay? Some things that he may talk about are going to be uncomfortable, but it's a safe environment. Is it okay for the university to ask him to do that? To say, hey, Jordan, regardless of what your personal views are on this, we want you to create a safe environment for our students and our staff. Are they allowed to do that? Yeah. Do you think Columbia College has standards for my behavior in here? Are there things that they would ask me to do and ask me not to do? They would, right? Yeah. They have every right to ask me to do certain things and not to do other things. Fortunately, I'm a professional, so they don't have to spell it all out for me. But there are rules of behavior, right? There are certain things in here that I have to do and certain things in here that I'm not allowed to do. And again, I'm a professional, so I don't want to do those things that I'm not allowed to do anyway. But, is it okay for the institution to ask him to behave in a certain way in class? Even if his personal views are different, and even if his academic research is different, right? What is his academic research on? What's that? Yeah, where's my little card here on him? There he is. Main areas of study are abnormal, social, and personality psychology. So I wonder if gender pronouns fits into any of those areas. Do you think so? Maybe. I kind of have a feeling that they don't. Like the use of pronouns and it's a linguistic issue. It is probably a sociological issue, maybe even a cultural issue if maybe anthropologists would be interested in it. I think if he was interested in the psychology of gender, maybe. He doesn't seem to be, but maybe. But again, does that include pronouns? Or even if it does include pronouns, can the university still ask him to use certain language in the classroom while he can pursue his academic interests as he sees fit? Because Jordan's kind of arguing here, hey, my rights to free speech are being violated and my academic freedom is being violated, and I don't think I have to do either of those things. But I ask you, is that actually happening? Is his academic freedom or his right to free speech being compromised here? I kind of don't think so either. Again, he's certainly allowed to have his personal views on this, but there's as an educator, there are standards for behavior, right? And you get to have, as a person, as a human being, you get to have your personal views on things. But being in the classroom is different, right? Being an educator it's a job, right? It's a role you're fulfilling, and it doesn't mean you can do whatever you want, right? There are standards to uphold, and so I would think, the university is allowed to ask him to do that. The university is not allowed to tell him what to research. and they're not allowed to tell him what kind of conclusions to come to about his academic research. So if he wants to make academic articles about how using pronouns will lead to a totalitarian state in Canada with Justin Trudeau as a dictator, if he wants to make that argument in his academic writing, he is allowed to do so. I imagine his academic buddies would laugh him out of the room, but he'd be allowed to do that, and the university cannot tell him not to. But can they ask him, in his role as a teacher, can they ask him to use this language? Is the question. What else did I want? What else is interesting in here?
Why does he believe that his freedom of speech is being compromised just by using the verb pronouns?
Why is that? Why does he feel that his freedom of speech is being compromised by not using these pronouns? Why does he?
By using the pronouns.
By using them, yeah. Why does he think his freedom of speech is being compromised?
Because he's being told what to say, not choosing.
Okay, because he's being told what to say and he's not choosing what to say. Okay, what else? What else is he feeling, do you think?
The whole free speech thing isn't a valid argument. Because like what? You're gonna like disrespect people and then defend yourself by saying I'm allowed to say what I want.
Yeah, free speech is kind of tricky that way, right? This is a bit of a tangent, but we'll talk about it here because it does make sense. Free speech has limits, right? So again, you cannot just say whatever the hell you want in society and it's fine, right? So number one, you cannot engage in hate speech, right? So you cannot use your free speech to spread hatred about other social groups. You're not allowed to do that. Your free speech does not extend that far. We know that. The other thing is that your free speech cannot really, in using that right, you can't use it in such a way that diminishes the rights of others. And so sometimes that comes into conflict, but in exercising any of your rights within a society, you can't exercise them in a way that steps on other people's rights, right? So everyone has to be able to exercise their right equally. There are some instances where two people's rights kind of come into conflict. It's either kind of one or the other, and I have a good example of that in a little bit that we'll talk about in a few more weeks. But yeah, you can't use your rights to take away the rights of others, right? And LGBTQ people, transgender people, they have a right not to be discriminated against, right? And so Jordan has a right to free speech, but these people also have the right not to be free from discrimination, right? The third thing is that just because you have free speech doesn't mean there are no consequences for what you say, right? And so give me an example of someone, maybe like a celebrity or something, who has said something or tweeted something and then he kind of got dropped by a company or a record label or something like that. Oh, Gina Carano. This just happened. Anyone watching The Mandalorian? Star Wars Mandalorian? She's an actress, or actor, I guess I should say. She was in The Mandalorian, Star Wars series, 2 seasons of it. But she made some Twitter posts about the political divide in the US, and she compared it to Nazi Germany. Like I mentioned, it's usually not a good comparison. Don't go there. She also made some anti-mask comments earlier in the COVID pandemic on Twitter. So she did that, and as a result, Disney fired her, and so she's not part of the show anymore. And so that's a tricky one too, because she does have a right to free speech. She does have a right to say what she wants about COVID and masks and the political divide in the United States. She's allowed to say those things, but there were also consequences for it, right? And so that's the other part of free speech, is just because you get to say what you want doesn't mean that people will not react in a way, and it doesn't mean that there should be or will be no consequences. And so unfortunately she made these comments, and now she had a pretty sweet job, and now she's out of the job. Now the other thing I should add, I'm not saying that necessarily was the right thing to do for Disney. Some of the things that one of the things that she said actually has some merit. The political divide, Nazi Germany thing. What she was trying to say was probably accurate, but it was a really bad comparison. So again, try not to compare things to Hitler or Nazi Germany, because there's usually not a good comparison and it comes off sounding really bad. But what she was trying to say was actually, there was some merit to it. She just said it really poorly.
What about the instance of Sky Jackson?
Of who? Of Janet Jackson?
Sky Jackson.
What's the Sky Jackson story?
Among. So yesterday I watched some video, and apparently Sky Jackson is a person who made a TED talk about bullying, and then her reputation is being completely tarnished by the act of doxing of other people.
So Sky is doxing people, or she's being
She's doxing people.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I don't know anything about what's going on there. Yeah, but that's a good example though. And if I get this wrong, I just learned about this like 10 seconds ago. So if I say the wrong thing here, don't crucify me.
That's wrong.
Yeah, but yeah, you can't use your free speech to openly target members of the public either, right? So she can't use her influence to go on Twitter and say, all these people are awful, you should, shower them with, social media posts that tell them how horrible they are. That's not a very responsible use of free speech either, right? There's going to be consequences if people do that, right? And so it's the same thing for Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump has a right to free speech, but now he's been kicked off Twitter because you can't use your free speech to incite an insurrection, or at least not on Twitter you can't, right? So again, there's a bigger conversation to have there as well. But yeah, just because you get to say what you want doesn't mean there will be no consequences for it. And you can't say what you want in such a way that takes away the rights of others. And you certainly can't say what you want if it constitutes hate speech, right? So freedom of speech is important and needs to be safeguarded, but we also need to understand that there are limits to it, right? You cannot simply say whatever you want and expect a free pass. That's not how it works. What else?
But he said what he said, and then he encouraged other people to like hate and death threats to the point where they want to be safe. So wouldn't you say like his speech?
Did he encourage that, or did it kind of just happen?
But it happened because of him.
Yeah, it did happen because of him, and we should point this out too, is that pay attention to how space is created, right? And so when Jordan Peterson sort of does this and says, I don't want to use this type of language, I think it's wrong, it creates a space for people to jump in and share their views, right? And some of these people are, much more hardcore than probably Jordan is. There seems to be a Hells Angels guy showing up at rallies. There's people who are, anti-LGBTQ. There's a religious leader who is standing with Jordan Peterson, probably because, I'm going to guess, but this religious leader has issues with different sexualities or gender identities. So yeah, his comment here creates space for other people to jump in, and that space can be created in either way, right? If people start talking about, the documentary we saw with Laverne Cox, that documentary is going to create space for other transgender people to step forward and share their stories, right? So you can create space in either way, right? But his comments here create space for people to share their kind of negative or discriminatory views. Donald Trump was great at this, right? Because all of his, racist, sexist comments created a lot of space for other people to jump forward and express their racist and sexist comments as well, right? So again, people who have, sort of people who have a presence in the culture and society, people who other people listen to, they can create space, and they can create space in a negative way or a positive way. And I'll leave it to you to decide what he's done here. But yeah, he's created space for people to step up and, create a more uncomfortable environment for transgender and gender non-binary people. What else should we say about this? I have some slides that kind of summarize these arguments, and we'll go through these things one by one. But do you want to take a little bit of a break first, and then we'll come back and we'll look at these arguments. I'll have them on screen, and then we can kind of see everything in one spot. Okay, take a little break, come back, we'll sort this out. Okay, and we're back. Sorry about the delay. Sorry about the delay getting back. So, I think we've kind of exposed both arguments. Okay, I think we've found the pieces, and I've got a slide here that kind of puts them together. And so here's what I'm going to. If you don't agree with me on this, that's okay. But this is kind of based on what you've told me and based on the way I see it. This is what the argument is. And so here's what Jordan Peterson is saying. He's saying he shouldn't be forced to use these gender-neutral pronouns by the university. Okay? He feels that the university can't tell him to do that. And so as good critical thinkers, we should always ask, well, why? Why not, Jordan? Why should we believe what you are telling us? And so he said this, I believe. He said that being compelled to use this language, so people telling him how to speak, leads to totalitarianism, leads to a state where the state has total control, the government has total control over people. He also says ideological language empowers power-mad people. And so it's kind of not clear. In the article, it might be HR, it might be liberals. I'm not really sure who these power-mad people are. I think liberals or people on the left wing are probably who he's talking about, but it's not entirely clear. There's an implicit premise, I think, the idea that being compelled to use this language violates his academic freedom. And I think there's a less implicit premise, there's a more explicit premise that using this language or making him use this language is actually a violation of his right to free speech. Okay? I think that is his argument. Would you agree? Again, I'm not asking you if you believe it, but is that what he seems to be saying? Okay. So, the opposite argument, or the other side is, again, the university, student associations, gender non-binary people, trans people, etc. I think that they're saying, yeah, that the university staff and students can be, maybe forced isn't a great word here, but should be required to use these gender-neutral pronouns. And so again, well, why should we believe this argument? Well, again, people have the right not to be discriminated against, right? You have the right to be referred to by your own name and gender, right? I made a joke a couple weeks ago when I said, oh, hey, Daniel, I think I'm going to call you Steve, right? And, we don't really talk about this because it almost sounds ridiculous, but Daniel has a right to be called Daniel, does he not? Yeah, I don't get to call him Steve just because I feel like it, right? That's disrespectful. He should be referred to, it's respectful to refer to him as he wants to be referred to, right? Discrimination and non-acceptance of transgender people emboldens others as well. It creates a space, right? And so even if Jordan isn't really saying, like Scotty pointed out, he's not really engaging in hate speech here, right? Jordan's not really spreading hate speech, but he's making some room for people who might want to, right? And again, I think he's smart enough to be aware of that. But anyway, that is happening, right? Being compelled to use this language does not violate his academic freedom. I kind of added this one in. I'm not sure if the article said it or not, but yeah, his academic freedom has to do with his research and his publications, not with what happens in his class where he is being paid to teach, right? And again, being compelled to use this language doesn't violate the right to free speech of others, okay? It's actually trying to respect the right of others not to be discriminated against, right? And so here, the right not to be discriminated against trumps sorry about bringing him up again, trumps the right to free speech, right? Because let's face it, being asked to use a pronoun is a pretty minor thing. Being discriminated against because you are part of a sexual or a gender minority, that's a big deal, right? Especially since, like we saw in the documentary, transgender people face a lot of discrimination and violence and murder already, right? So it seems like these people are in need of greater protection. You know, white males using a pronoun probably don't need that much, right? So sometimes we have to sort of judge whose rights are more important, and in this case it's this minoritized, vulnerable group. So let's analyze these. What did I say about arguments when we wanted to sort of evaluate them? We want to see if the premises are true and if they are logical support for the conclusion. So glance over these 4 here. Now, putting aside truth for a second, are they all reasons why someone would not want to use certain language? Putting aside truth. So, would you not want to use certain language because it led to totalitarianism? Yes, totalitarianism is bad, I think. We wouldn't want to encourage an authoritarian state. Should we empower power-mad people? Doesn't sound like a good thing to do. Should academic freedom be violated? No, I don't think it should. Should right to free speech be violated? No, I don't think so. So these are all kind of legitimate, rational support for his argument, but are they true? Does using this language lead to totalitarianism? Yeah, hard to imagine, right? It's a premise that's not very intuitive, right? Like when I told you coffee is delicious, you might have agreed or disagreed with me, but it's pretty intuitive, right? You can think about it and say, oh yeah, okay, people like to drink it. There's a Starbucks on every corner. Coffee must be delicious, even if I don't like it, right? We kind of intuitively know that to be true, but this is not something that we can kind of intuitively know. I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know how using gender-neutral pronouns leads to Justin Trudeau as a brutal dictator. I don't get. That's a long walk, as they say. It's a long walk from one to the other. So I would need some explanation. That one feels like a bit of a stretch to me. Ideological language empowers power-mad people. What do you think? Is this true? Is this true? Or do we even know what this means? I don't know who these power-mad people are.
Assuming that it's HR, I don't think it empowers them.
Probably not. Yeah. Plus, the Human Resources Department of the University of Toronto, how much power can they really have? I don't know about that. Even if they're the left, even if they're people on the left, even if they're liberals, does using this language really empower them? I don't know. That seems like a bit of a long walk too. Maybe, but I'm going to need some explanation there, Jordan. That's not intuitively true. What about these last two? Does being compelled to use this language violate his academic freedom? No, not in the classroom it doesn't, right? If they told him to do it in his academic writing, different story. In the classroom, no. He's under the jurisdiction, under the control of the college, right? He's providing education to students, and so he's under a different set of regulations. Does this violate his right to free speech? No, it does not, right? Because they're only asking him to use the pronouns. They're not saying that he can't speak out against it. In fact, he's been allowed to speak out against it. They're just saying when you're in the classroom, use these pronouns. That's all. So are any of these really true? Doesn't seem to be, right? Those first two, I don't know, they're a stretch. Maybe there's a way you can connect these two things, but it's going to be quite an explanation, I would think. And these last two, I think we can agree, are not true. What about this one? Should people use pronouns because people have the right not to be discriminated against? Yeah. Is that true? That's true. People have a right not to be discriminated against. Does not using these pronouns create space for other people to express discrimination and hatred towards these groups? Yeah, we saw that happen with this issue, and we've seen it happen before with things that Trump has said and done. So that's a reason why we should actually use these pronouns. Does this language, using this language, does it not violate academic freedom? That's true. It's not a violation of academic freedom. It does not violate the right of free speech. It actually respects the right of people not to be discriminated against. Is that true as well? Yeah. So who has the better argument here? I would say these guys do, right? All of these premises are true. All of these premises logically support this conclusion. As for Jordan Peterson, we have an argument that is two of these are not true, and two of these premises are kind of such a stretch that I'm even if he explained them to me, I'm not sure I would believe it, right? It's just hard to imagine how, calling someone by a pronoun can lead to totalitarianism. That's just, it's pretty hyperbolic, right? It's quite an exaggeration. How does that even happen? He has a PhD. Yeah, and I don't know the answer to that, Mulder, but it is a question that I ask, right? That, this guy should know better, right? He should at least be able to construct a better argument than this, right? And again, there's, I don't know that I'm not sure how he would argue this in such a way that he could be successful, but this is not a very good argument. Now, is it possible that the article we read misrepresented Jordan Peterson's position? Is that possible? Because he didn't write it, right? A reporter wrote this article. So is it possible that his position was not represented well? Possible, right? If you're reading good journalism, that's less likely, right? Because journalists are not, it's bad journalism to just, pick some quotes from someone and put them together in a way that makes them seem like a crazy person, right? That's bad journalism. You shouldn't do that, right? Professional journalists try to make sure that whatever that person is arguing or saying actually comes through in the article, so that they represent what the person is actually saying, right? Bad journalism, yeah, they pick a few quotes and weave them together in a way that makes it seem like the person is saying something that they're really not. This is the Toronto Star. It's a reasonably legitimate newspaper. It's probably not the best one in Canada, but it's still good. So I don't know that that's happening, but it's worth considering that, maybe his real position didn't come out as well as it could have, because Jordan didn't write this article. But yeah, what do you think? This is kind of interesting, right? Because even though we have someone who should be a credible source, he's really assembled not a very good argument, right? Not really a believable one, even for us. Why do you think he's making this argument then? Why is he saying what he's saying? He what? To manipulate other people? Okay. Why is he making this argument, even though it's not very good? Yeah, he's certainly expressing his opinion, and he's in a way, he's kind of risked his academic career over this, right? Like he's got a few disciplinary letters from the university administration. They haven't done anything. They haven't punished him, and I'm not really sure if they can or not. But he's kind of taken a big risk. He clearly believes strongly enough in this to risk his career, which is saying something. Why is he saying this? What's kind of interesting about this is that as a result of all this, some transgender students stopped coming to class, right? They felt safe, or they felt unsafe. There were sort of meetings around Jordan Peterson where people were expressing discriminatory views, and so transgender people and gender non-binary people actually felt less safe on campus as a result. But what actually happened to Jordan Peterson? What were the consequences of this for him? They were talking about it at the very beginning of the article, actually. In some circles, he might be getting a bad reputation, but what's going on with his Patreon account? He's going up. So people are donating to his Patreon account. He can actually afford to have his lectures professionally videoed now and put on the internet, right? People are actually taking his class, right? There's that one kid at the beginning of the article said, "Oh, I've got to get in this guy's class. He's saying things that people need to say," right? And again, I'm not sure I agree with that statement, but Jordan's actually become a lot more popular as a result. You don't know this, of course, but prior to this whole controversy, nobody knew who this guy was, okay? Like, unless you actually took his class or were like, an academic psychologist in Canada who was reading academic journals, like this guy was a nobody. Nobody knew who this guy was. And now he's front page news. He's writing for the National Post sometimes. He's a person that people are talking about. So he got way more popular, and he got a lot of donations to his Patreon account, and his classes are filling up with people who I assume think like him or want to think like him. So has this really hurt him at all? Interestingly not, right? So his fight against people who are gender non-binary or transgender people has actually not hurt him much at all. It's actually benefited him. But transgender people feel more marginalized, more discriminated against, more unsafe, right? So even though technically he has a bad argument here, and technically I think we can agree that the university can ask him to do this, not only has he not suffered any negative consequences, things have gotten a lot better. People know who he is, right? People are talking about him. He's writing articles and getting donations and things like that. Does that make any sense to you at all? Feels like it shouldn't be that way. But again, that's the way it's kind of worked out. Which is often the case, right? And think about dominant and minoritized groups, right? Jordan Peterson is a white, male, Canadian, educated, right? He's got a lot of privilege, and when he says something, people actually listen to him. People actually think he knows what he's talking about. This argument here would suggest that he does not, but sorry, Jordan, but I'm just going by what you give me here. The argument here would suggest that he actually does not know what he's talking about, but it's actually benefited him, right? And the real victims of this, who are transgender and gender non-binary people, they actually haven't been helped, right? it's actually made things worse for them, at least in the short term. Maybe in the long term, things get better, but this has actually negatively affected them and positively affected him, even though I would argue that he's got the worst argument, and because of these arguments, I would say that he is in the wrong here. He is, he should be using these pronouns, and it's okay for the university to ask him to do that. Interesting. Final comments on this? It often does, and again, that's why I urge you not to use the Nazi or the Hitler comparison really ever, because again, it does get people emotional, but also a lot of things that appear to be similar to those things are in fact not that similar. And so yeah, you can arouse people's emotions by comparing something to something that has a very strong emotional feeling around it, but it usually doesn't work out very well. Gina Carano's thing, what she said in her tweet, one of the things that got her fired, was she said that in the United States, there's such a political divide, right, between Democrats and Republicans that, basically the Democrats are saying, oh, the Republicans are evil and everything is bad about them, which is not entirely untrue, but anyway. And the Republicans are saying the same things. Oh, the Democrats are horrible and they just want to take power and turn us into a communist state, right? And there's so much propaganda that's being exchanged between the two sides. Gina was saying, oh, well, propaganda was used in Nazi Germany to help turn the German population against the Jewish population, which is true, but it's not a good comparison, right? What was happening in Nazi Germany is not what is happening in the US. Propaganda is being used, polarization is happening, but it's still not the same, right? There was a pretty big power difference between the Nazis and the Jewish people, right? Whereas Republicans and Democrats, it's not the same. It's not the same comparison. So again, I would urge you don't use the Nazis in your comparison. It doesn't go well. But I would say that, Gina was pointing out something that is true, right? There's pretty heavy use of propaganda and fake news and disinformation, to sort of support one group of people over another. And they're both doing it in the US, but it's not Nazi Germany all over again. So anyway. Okay, that was good though. That was a good examination of this article and this issue. And I think it's useful because again, just because somebody is on paper is a credible source, doesn't necessarily mean they have the best argument, right? And here, you would think Jordan Peterson would have the better argument, right? He's the academic, he's the tenured professor at the university. But as it turns out, his argument is kind of weak, I think. And in fact, the university has the stronger argument. Again, you can disagree with that if you like, but I think that's what we have here. Okie dokie smokies, what's up?
Every single professor, scientist in the world has to be pretty much literally correct about everything.
Yeah, and that's the feeling, right? That every academic is correct about everything. But in fact, maybe not, right? It's good to question people, right? It's good to question people, except for me. Nothing I say can be questioned. No, it's good to question people because people can be wrong, right? People can make bad arguments, right? Jordan Peterson can be making, I almost feel like this is an argument about a different thing, but gender non-binary and transgender people are the casualties of it. I don't think this is kind of the argument that Jordan wants to have. I think he wants to have a different one. But again, these people are being caught in the crossfire, and that's not fair to them. But yeah, question people, right? Use your critical thinking, examine people's argument, see if they have a reasonable case, right? Because sometimes people who seem to be credible don't have the best reasons behind their belief. Or again, they really want to have a different argument, but that's not this one. Okay. We are over time. Thank you very much. That was good. We did a good job pulling that apart. Come back tomorrow and we'll talk about I think we'll talk about advertising. Gear switch. Okay. That's it. Thank you everyone. I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.